PGE wants our compliance to its continuing to pollute Oregon for another 10 years. But we cannot afford to wait another 10 years. Global warming is an immediate threat, and Oregonians have already waited for 3 decades for the significant emission reductions from Boardman to which they are entitled. We cannot afford another 10 years of pollution that harms our environment and our health. We also need to end our coal use in Oregon so that we can stop contributing to the destruction of the land where PGE mines its coal, the Powder River Basin in Montana and Wyoming. The mining process used there, called strip mining, leaves in its wake as much destruction as the mountaintop removal mining being practiced in Appalachia. Strip mining in the West is destroying the lives of ranchers whose livelihood depends on the continuing integrity of their land, and is also despoiling the land that is integral to the culture and history of the Native Americans of this region. For all these reasons, there is no time to lose. We must close the Boardman coal plant much earlier than 2020. Tonight we are going to highlight the impacts coal has on our health and our environment, and the moral imperative we have to address this problem now. We are very pleased to have speakers from our partners, Physicians for Social Responsibility and Friends of the Columbia Gorge. So now I'd like to introduce our first speaker, Catherine Thomason, MD, who is with Physicians for Social Responsibility. She will talk about how coal and global warming impact our health.
PSR has been working to bring the medical voice and the health voice to this campaign against coal across the country. It's just been fabulous partnering with Sierra Club on this, not just in Oregon, but across the country, bringing information about coal and its health effects to the American public, who have decidedly said no to many coal plants. This is a picture from the Industrial Revolution. This is coal mining, but this isn't really the picture of coal mining today. The picture of coal mining today is huge. It's tons and tons and train car after train car of coal that goes across the country. In fact, this area in Montana and Wyoming produces more coal than any other region, not West Virginia. 40% of the coal that fuels our electric generation, 50% of our electricity comes from coal, comes from this coal mining area in Montana and Wyoming. This particular mine, the Black Thunder mine, is where we get our coal at Boardman here in Oregon. 80 trains a day leave this coal mine. And coal is harmful whether you start at the beginning in the coal mining, where coal mining as an industry has one of the highest rates of occupational health hazard, all the way to burning it, which we'll talk about in more detail. And then what do we do with the waste? Here in Boardman, we live in a very dry, Boardman actually exists in a dry part of the state, and so the ash is just dumped and tamped down. But in many parts of the country, the ash is mixed with a slurry of water and kept in impoundments. And in December 2008, this huge impoundment in the East Coast broke, devastating in its wake huge areas of land and houses with a slurry that's incredibly toxic. So as you mine coal, you also mine heavy metals, you mine a lot of other things that are harmful to health and that are mixed in with water and dumped into our rivers. So getting into what happens when the coal is actually burned and what happens when people live downwind from that, one of the types of pollution is particulate pollution. The particles are mixtures of acids like sulfates, nitrates. Heavy metals can be attached to them. Other toxic chemicals can be attached to them. They can be so tiny, less than 10 microns. They can get deep into our lungs, and the tiniest particles actually leave our lungs and go straight into our bloodstream around to the other organs. And that way it is carried, these heavy metal particles actually can be carried and deposited within our body. The particulate pollution can remain in the atmosphere for days, even weeks. So while here in Oregon we may not have as much problem with the downwind area of the coal that we burn at Boardman, it's carried to many parts of the western United States, and these things then deposit out and pollute our waters and airway. It's estimated that this particulate pollution contributes to 4 of the 5 major leading causes of death in the United States. Those are heart disease, cancers, stroke, and chronic lung disease. So this is a major impact on the 4 of the 5 deadliest causes of death in the United States. Another pollutant is ozone. Of course, we want ozone to be up in the stratosphere to protect us from ultraviolet light, but when it's down here at the ground level, it is a pollutant, a criteria level pollutant. It's formed by combinations of volatile organic compounds. So those come from our tailpipes, come from our industry, comes from the Smoky Mountains, right? Those volatile organic compounds. It mixes with nitrates in the air, and in the presence of heat and sunlight produces ozone. Now, how many people have been in a hot tub that's purified by ozone? Right? That it bubbles through there and it kills bacteria. It can kill bacteria. So what does it do to our lungs when we breathe it? Okay? In the next slide, you can see a picture of a healthy lung tube that's pale, it's clear, it's wide open, and this is an inflamed airway of somebody who's been exposed to ozone. So a worker who's doing construction in the road and you have an ozone alert day, it's like having a sunburn in your lungs. So it's an irritant, it directly harms the tissue, it increases asthma rates for our children and in our adults, and it even increases the problems of low birth weight babies in studies that have been done in Los Angeles. So women who are pregnant who are exposed to higher levels of ozone compared to other women living in different parts of the city without high levels of ozone have smaller babies, which has a variety of health risks associated with it. It's just a marker. Well, we all know about mercury now, and mercury is a heavy metal that's found in coal. And when you burn the coal, you release the mercury up the smokestack. And so one of the pollutant controls that actually I think Boardman is planning to put onto the smokestack, even if they do continue burning coal until 2020, is to decrease the amount of mercury that's actually let out into the atmosphere. But unfortunately, this has been going on for quite some time, and so many of us, including 1 out of 6 women of childbearing age, have mercury levels that are potentially harmful to their unborn child if they become pregnant. Mercury is a neurotoxin. It harms our brains. It actually is also known to harm our hearts, so that even not in the unborn child, but in adults, mercury can be a toxicant to our kidneys, to our brain, to our heart. And it's not healthy for us. So we really want to, and Boardman actually is currently the largest point source of mercury in the state. The statistics on taking the EPA data and looking at how it impacts us here in Oregon, with coal emissions and the Clean Air Task Force, there are 34,000 additional asthma attacks caused by our Boardman coal burning power plant, 2,000 asthma-related emergency room visits, 1,000 hospital admissions, 1,800 heart attacks, I don't know how they got away without going into the hospital, and 1,000 premature deaths. So that's a heavy price to pay for coal, but a relatively small one. But this coal plant is not all that we are exposing ourselves to, of course, in terms of coal burning that we actually utilize. So what produces the most human-caused greenhouse gas in the United States? What industry? Coal plants. Not technically, actually electric industry, power generation as a whole, produces the most. So the electric power industry as a whole is 34%, transportation is 28%. Go ahead. But of that power industry, whoops, don't click it, don't click it. Of that power industry, about a significant portion is from coal, obviously, that's causing it. We'll get to that slide in a minute. This is a picture of what we produce electricity-wise in Oregon. Okay? So of all the electricity we produce in Oregon, 8% is from Boardman. Okay? So you say, well, we're pretty good. We can be kind of proud of that. The rest of the country, 50% of electricity comes from coal. Go ahead. But what do we actually use here in Oregon? We use 38% coal. Some statistics say 41%, depending on how the mix is arranged. And we get that coal from other plants in Wyoming, Nevada, Montana, Idaho, and we import that coal-burning electricity into our homes. So I think that's just important to remember that Boardman is one piece of this and that we need to keep working on it across the country. And this is what I'm getting at in terms of what are the greenhouse gas emissions. Coal is a carbon-containing substance, right? So is natural gas, which is just methane. But you get a lot more power out of a unit of natural gas than you do out of coal. So you have to burn more coal, therefore releasing more carbon dioxide for the amount of electricity that you get. So coal is the worst of the fossil fuels in terms of the amount of power you get per ton or per amount of coal that you burn. So I just think this is really kind of interesting looking at the mix of sources and what's causing our greenhouse gas emissions. Sunlight comes in, it's trapped by these greenhouse gases when it becomes radiant heat and it is unable to get out. And if we didn't have those greenhouse gases, we would be about 14 degrees minus centigrade as opposed to where we live and are able to function ourselves here. The global warming or greenhouse effect and climate change are going to affect our health. And they're going to affect it, in my opinion, it's the greatest public health threat of anything that we have seen in the past. Our polar ice is melting, raising our sea level. We are seeing greater evaporation and therefore greater precipitation. So we're going to have more extreme weather events in the form of great snowfalls, rainfalls, flooding, and so on. Go ahead. So what is the heat going to look like? I think this is really, really important because we're talking about, right now, 2 degrees Fahrenheit increase in Oregon. Okay, and the global average temperature overall is about 1 to 1.2 degrees rise. But even if we do everything we possibly can, because carbon dioxide stays in the atmosphere for 100 years, we are going to get, globally, 3.6 degrees Fahrenheit hotter by the end of the century. Okay? Well, that's not too bad. It'd be like today, we'd be a little warmer and we'd all be happier, right? Well, wrong, because in the summer, that value is anywhere from 6 to 15 degrees Fahrenheit hotter, depending on where you are in Oregon. Because in the summer, the average temperature is going to get hotter than the overall global average temperature. Now, if we don't do everything possible, what's going to happen to us? The global average temperature is going to be almost 11 degrees Fahrenheit hotter. Global average temperature. So imagine what that means in the summer, not so hot in the winter in terms of the increase. So this is where you get into the 15 degrees, 16 degrees Fahrenheit elevation average in the summer. So this is really hot. And so people are going to be feeling quite sick with heat waves. In California in 2006, the electricity went out. What's going to happen to a nuclear power plant when the water is too warm to cool the plant? You have to turn it off. That's what happened in some of the plants in France in 2003. Some people died, not too many, but a lot of people went to the emergency room and a lot of animals died. This is one heat wave where 25,000 cattle and 700,000 chickens died because the temperature stayed high and had high evening temperatures as well. Okay? The demand, part of the reason that the electricity went out is the demand was so great for air conditioning, obviously. Sea levels rise. The International Panel for Climate Change has a very modest estimate for sea level rise, but we're very concerned about the increase in wave height, the increased tidal surge, the impact on water sources along the coast with saltwater infiltration, the increase in algae blooms with toxicity. So there's a lot of impacts even above the sea level rise. But it's estimated in looking at geologic time when the global temperature was as warm as it's going to be shooting for when we hit our carbon dioxide levels that we're planning to hit in the future, that it was 1 meter to 2 meters higher. So even though the IPCC is thinking that we're going to get anywhere from 6 to 15 inches higher over the next century, there's very grave concerns that it's going to be higher than that. And what's happened here already in Oregon? Well, it's warmed up, as I've already said, and the closer you are to the North Pole, the warmer you already are. So it's warmed almost 3 degrees in Alaska. We've lost some snowpack in the Cascades, from which we get a lot of our summertime irrigation water, drinking water, fish water in our rivers. And we expect 50 to 70% loss by 2050. Obviously, that has grave impacts on the streams as well as electricity production in the summertime. Waterborne diseases are worse both in drought, when water concentrations become greater for potential pollutants and infectious agents, as well as when we have floods. So when we have floods, we have higher rates of cryptosporidium, we have higher rates of a variety of infectious diseases. And the other infectious disease that's of concern is those borne by insects, because insects like the heat. So there's concerns about increasing dengue fever. Malaria obviously used to be here in Oregon, isn't here anymore because we kill the mosquitoes that carry it. But the resurgence around the world with malaria is going to be pretty profound. It's certainly going to impact our agriculture. 2 more degrees, I believe, centigrade, and we don't have Pinot Noir grapes in Oregon. So our grape harvest is very temperature specific, but there's other temperature specific crops. And the problem with these heat waves is the amount of irrigation water that's going to be needed for crops in general, of which 60% of our crops here in Oregon are irrigated. So we need a new energy path. We need it in any way possible that we can get it quickly, because time is short and we're going to be heating up. We need to make changes. Obviously, these are a few of the ways: efficiency and decreasing our electricity use. Working on our transportation systems, of course, is a big one, but stopping the coal-burning power plants is essential. It's a medical emergency. It's absolutely imperative that burning coal is dangerous to our health and the health of the planet. So I hope that you, like I, are demanding clean energy, not only by buying it, but actually talking to PGE and coming to the hearings, which I know you're all ready and willing to do, which is absolutely fantastic. PGE is proud of the fact that 14% of their customers demand clean energy, and they do it through some having to purchase, of course, outside of their own domain. But the more we demand green and the more action we take, the more likely we are to make changes.
I'm Stacia Kearns. I'm the other organizer working on the Beyond Coal campaign here in Oregon, and it's great to see so many people show up to learn about these critical issues and find out what you can do. So thanks for being here again. I want to introduce Kelly Beamer, who was our next wonderful speaker. She works for Friends of the Columbia Gorge, and they are one of our great partners on this effort to move beyond coal and phase out Boardman early. And she's going to be talking about the impacts on the environment that Boardman has on the Columbia River Gorge.
Thank you so much, Sierra Club, for hosting tonight, and thank you all for joining us and your willingness to learn more about the issue, to be here tonight, and to help us with this very important campaign. I was really inspired by your words starting out talking about how many coal plants have been prevented. And Boardman right now is Oregon's only coal-burning power plant, and we hope to see it out of operation in the very near future. There are other exciting ways to move ahead. So while Catherine did such a wonderful job talking about the impacts of coal on human health, I'm going to spend a few minutes talking about the impacts of coal on environmental health. In particular, on a landscape that I think is very near and dear to all of us here in Portland and Southwest Washington, the Columbia River Gorge National Scenic Area. I'm going to use the first part of my talk to just sort of go over some of the very special attributes that are in the Columbia River Gorge, just a reminder of why we love it and why we're working to protect it. And then I'm going to use the second part of my talk to go over some of the impacts that we're seeing in the gorge from Boardman, from the coal burning process, particularly in haze. There's a very significant problem with visibility in the gorge, and acid rain as well. So just a reminder, Columbia Gorge is really unlike any place on Earth. It's the only sea level passage through the Cascade Mountain Range. It is renowned for its unbelievable beauty in every season. Right now the wildflowers are just going nuts in the eastern end, Catherine Creek area. It's going to be just rolling on from now into April. Waterfalls, you can't drive through the gorge without stopping and, you know, bringing your family and friends and relatives to Multnomah Falls. Has the largest concentration of waterfalls. And wildlife, when we talk about the health impacts to humans, but the gorge is a very important habitat to several special species, including, you know, the bald eagle, listed several species of salmon and steelhead. There's a great diversity of wildlife in the Columbia River Gorge. And like I said, the wildlife and wildflowers are a very special attribute. In particular, there's 16 species of wildflowers that grow nowhere else in the world that can be found in the Columbia River Gorge. Plant species are very sensitive to acid rain, and some of these impacts we'll be talking about later on that come directly from coal. And what makes the gorge so special is the fact that there are all of these unique ecosystems. There's 5 specific ecosystems in the gorge because of the diversity of rainfall. And you know, you see it when you're heading from the Willamette Valley and it's lush, and you end up in the Dalles and it's just this wide open, dry landscape. And there's just an incredible diversity. Cascade Locks gets 75 inches of rain, and then out into the Dalles there's 14 inches per year. Again, in that 88-mile corridor. And this is what we see on the western end when we're heading in, that lush green. This is a view from Cape Horn on the Washington side. Great illustration of the eastern end of the gorge, Miller Island area, with that dry, arid climate. So the gorge protects, you know, scenic beauty, natural beauty, and natural resources, recreation opportunities, obviously with the trails, and also cultural resources. The Columbia Gorge is basically was a trading zone for several Native American tribes, and the Columbia Plateau Indians occupied the area. That's a picture of Celilo Falls, which I'm sure you all know about. That was inundated when the dam was built. But there are, as a result of this incredible rich history, wonderful petroglyphs that are still protected in the gorge. In fact, we are going to be planning a hike with the Sierra Club in May, going out to Horse Thief State Park, looking at this outdoor museum where you can see some of these beautiful rock paintings. And the reason we're going to be looking at these is because these resources are being impacted by acid rain, and they are dissolving some of the pictures that are now in that museum. So in 1986, the National Scenic Area Act was passed, which protected this 88-mile corridor from the Sandy River, basically extending all the way to the Deschutes River. And part of the main thrust of the act is to protect the scenic, natural, cultural, and recreation resources of the gorge. And what we're here tonight to talk about is where air quality falls into that. And the Scenic Area Act does require protection of air quality in the National Scenic Area. And sadly, to report, the gorge is seeing a lot of damaging effects from poor air quality. Acid rain and fog deposition in the gorge is a very serious problem. Visibility is a major issue. Views are impaired 95% of the time. And this pollution is causing, we're seeing effects in these entire ecosystems because of this. So there is, if you drive out on the Washington side of the gorge, past Lyle, almost to the edge of the Scenic Area Act, there's a town called Wishram, and that's where the U.S. Forest Service has an air quality monitoring site. You can go on their website when you get home, and there's a webcam constantly looking out at this view of Mount Hood. This is where they also collect data for nitrogen, sulfur, different air quality elements, And there's a great data bank of air quality samples that go back more than 10 years. So that picture you saw before was a spectacular view where Mount Hood was evident. And unfortunately, that's the rare view. This is a picture probably in November. The gorge experiences something called inversions, where the wind changes dramatically in the winter, and you have an east to west shift in wind. Well, Boardman, as you all know, is on the east side of the gorge, and as a result, in the winter, there's documented studies that air quality is at its far worse in the winter seasons than it is in the summer because of that eastern wind bringing in that poor air quality from the east end. And I just went ahead and pulled these next few slides. This is actually from the U.S. Forest Service. This is a study that they have. But if you could go through it quickly, Robin, just to kind of give the visual effect of the difference between the clear day and then the typical November day. At the end, it loses. It really, yeah, it's gone. So that, of course, comes with the human health impacts that Catherine was talking about to these people who live in the communities within the gorge and the residents on the east end of the gorge. So there's the haze issue. And there's also the issue of acid rain. And for all of those of you who have been in the gorge, you know that there are those strands of fog that just sort of hang in the woods. And that causes acid fog deposition, which oftentimes can be more damaging than actually acid rain, which comes down on a lot of the tree and plant species. There was a study done in 2005 by the U.S. Forest Service. These are really shocking numbers, but basically studying the fog deposition, and found, that they were extremely high. It says that nitrogen from ammonium and nitrate deposition ranged from 11.5 to 25.4 kilograms per hectacre for a 4.5-month study period. Deposition rates of nitrogen above 3 to 5 are harmful to ecosystems. So that's way above what's harmful to ecosystems. In fact, they compare it to the acidity of vinegar, just to give you an idea on some of the worst episodes. So of course, this has a cascading effect through the ecosystem from the rain into a lot of the rivers, which protect salmon and steelhead in the gorge. And like I mentioned before, the acid rain does have an effect and is dissolving a lot of these Native American rock paintings and pictographs that are so special. And the one we saw before is She Who Watches, as I'm sure all of you know that face. The source? Anyone guess? Take a wild guess. Okay, that's a picture of Boardman, and just to give you a sense of the amount of coal that comes in every day that's being burned, the plant. I want to talk about, there are so many studies out there, and I'd love if you have questions about these studies, please follow up with me. I'd be happy to email them to you and get them to you. I wanted to focus on this one in particular, done by Dr. Dan Jaffe. He works for University of Washington. He did this study in collaboration with the Yakima tribe. They're very interested in this issue because of the cultural resources they have in the gorge. This study, you can go to the next slide. What it did was look at an 8-month period in 2005 where Boardman plant was shut down. And knowing that the worst air quality month happens in November with that east to west wind, he looked at that air quality monitoring site and compared the 2005 data, Boardman is down, not operating, they had a broken turbine, with 11 other years of data where Boardman was up during that time period. And what he found was pretty significant. During the PG shutdown period in 2005, air pollution levels were cut in half when compared to the 11 other years of the data that he gathered. And this again is the particular matter that Catherine was talking about that has that very dangerous human health impact. He also studied NOx and SOx and noticed the same trend as well. So we do know that Boardman is directly having impacts here in the gorge. This is a little, I don't think you can see the state there, but picture Oregon, Washington. The EPA a few years back decided to really crack down on this issue of visibility in the gorge and our special areas that are Class 1 airsheds. These are wilderness areas and national parks. And they are requiring federal agencies to work with state agencies to bring levels to natural visibility by 2064. So it's not just the gorge we're talking about that are seeing these impacts from coal burning power plants. Look at all of these familiar, beautiful places that we all have been to and love and are very much iconic places in our region. So the gorge is officially is not a wilderness area or a national park. However, in their monitoring, it is considered a Class 1 airshed on a state level. And I also wanted to show you guys a little bit about another study that's being done by a lichenologist, a woman named Linda Geiser. She works for U.S. Forest Service Region 6 out of Corvallis and works with Oregon State to study the relationship of sensitive lichen species and air quality. And amazingly enough, she has found that specific species of lichens are bioindicators. This kind of just shows, the difference between some of these healthy specimens of lichen compared with lichens that are in areas with high levels of nitrogen and high levels of air pollution, basically. And she's worked with volunteers and research students in the gorge, in particular, looking at this issue. She kind of describes the gorge as the tailpipe. You have this huge kind of canyon, and it gets pollution from Portland in the summer and then Boardman in the winter, and it really does impact these sensitive lichen species. This is from a West Coast study she did, but again, just sort of gives you sort of these hot spots where the red indicates where the most sensitive and rare species of lichens are absent, and then the green are the more healthy populations. So again, when we're talking about this one power plant and its ripple effect into our sensitive ecosystems and our landscapes that we love, it really is on so many levels, probably more than we even realize. So just in summary, currently PG Boardman is uncontrolled for SOx and NOx and CO2. It's the largest industrial source of haze causing SOx and NOx in Oregon. It's the second source of mercury in Oregon. Pollutes the Columbia Gorge and Class 2 and Class 1 airsheds. As has been said before, it's operating in direct violation of the Clean Air Act. And Friends and several other environmental groups are really coming together to insist on compliance with the Clean Air Act. This is a picture of Dell's Mountain Ranch in about April. Springtime is a great time to go out and put on your hiking boots, enjoy yourself.
Hi, I'm Robin. I'm an organizer here on the Beyond Coal campaign, and I'm actually going to talk to you guys about two things. I'm going to talk to you, one, about what's the deal with PGE's 2020 proposal, and I'm also going to talk to you about some of these federal regulations that we're talking about coming down from the EPA, especially on ground level ozone that Catherine Thomason alluded to and how bad it is for us. So I thought I'd get to some of the good stuff, or juicy stuff at least, on the 2020 plan for PGE. So you guys probably heard a couple months ago, PGE said, okay, we cry uncle, we know 2040 is not going to fly with you guys. So how about 2020? Does that work? And the problem is that, as you've seen from the presentations, that another 10 years to address global warming, another 10 years to address our health problems, and another 10 years of unchecked pollution into the gorge is not acceptable. Because see, the problem is PGE wants to violate the Clean Air Act for another 10 years in exchange for shutting down in 2020. They've already been doing it for 30 years, and now they want another 10. It's not acceptable. But what we were starting to allude to is some of these federal standards and state standards. We don't see how they'll ever get by them. So one, they have a state level requirement to put pollution controls on their coal plant because they are completely out of compliance with the Clean Air Act, and they are the major contributor to haze in the gorge. And so the Department of Environmental Quality has said, you got to clean up your act. And you need to have pollution controls put on in a series of stages in 2011, 2014, and ending up in 2017 with the final big push. That totals over $500 million in cost for those pollution controls. So if PG is going to shut down early, they want to avoid those costs. They're not going to put all that on and then shut the plant down. And so they want DEQ to say, okay, we'll give you another 10 years. Not only do they want DEQ to say that, but then the EPA approves that plan, and they want the EPA to approve that they can pollute against the Clean Air Act for another 10 years. Another federal standard that's going to be coming down very soon is called the MAC standard, and it's Maximum Achievable Control Technology. And it's another source of, or another way that we can force them to have to clean up the coal plant, right? And the EPA says that they'll have these rules out by 2011, and compliance will be expected by 2015. Federal rules, 2015, not 2020. So PGE wants to go to Congress and get a congressional act that says, it's okay, you guys can go till 2020. That 2015 number is soft. No, that's not going to happen. And so this 2020 plan has so many problems, and yet they want us to go, okay, we'll stop opposing you, we'll support you, we'll ask the federal regulators for these exemptions for you, even though we know it can't happen. And as all of this is going on, PGE has not taken the 2040 date off the table, folks. This is their backup plan. They are planning to go to the PUC in a month from now and say, we want to try for 2020, but make sure that you approve us running coal till 2040 and approve the $500 million of pollution controls. So the whole time they're going to have this 2040 date in their back pocket, and they want us to just stop opposing them, even though we know that 2020 is not going to work. So they're going to go through this process, they're going to find out 2020 doesn't work, and they're going to go back to the 2040 plan. If they were serious about shutting down this plan, they would be looking at a date that complied with federal and state law and shut down the plant early. Right. So that is our point. And so we, plan to make this point heard as loud and clear as possible, and especially in front of the Public Utilities Commission, who will be the ones looking at this plan. So going forward, we're going to have some pretty good, interesting months coming up, and we're going to need your support on all of this. Catherine talked a little bit about ground level ozone and how bad it is for our health. Ozone down on the ground is like getting a sunburn in your lungs. I mean, it is bad for your health. It exacerbates asthma, causes chest pain and cough, and worsens respiratory problems and causes permanent lung damage. Right now, the level's set at 75 parts per billion. That sounds really small, but even at these levels, they are causing serious health problems for us. And so, like Seisha said, there is a new change in the guard, and the EPA has been asleep for the last 8 years, and it has woken up. And it has put down a number of different regulations that are making it increasingly hard to burn coal in this country. And this is the next one on the block. And so basically what we are looking for is for them to lower it to 60 parts per billion. This is going to save thousands of dollars in health costs and lives. And it's going to help us clean up areas like the Columbia Gorge. And for Oregon, this means that under these new proposed rules, Multnomah County will no longer be in compliance. So we're going to have to get serious about putting together plans that are cleaning up our air, and that means shutting down our coal plants, and that means cleaning up our transportation. And so, but these new limits, though they are being fought by industry tooth and nail right now, they're good for our health. They're good for our health. They will save lives and will help us breathe a little easier. And it's time that we start moving away from these dirty energy sources. We need to shut down the Boardman coal plant, and we need to move on to clean energy. But we know that when we tell the EPA what we want, they listen. Last year, we went to the EPA when they were holding hearings on whether or not to claim that CO2 was a danger to our human health and welfare. It's really funny, CO2 is causing so much havoc, and yet it's not regulated. And so the EPA started to look at this, oh, you know what, this is really harming us, and maybe we should start regulating this as a pollutant. And so they held a series of hearings, and some of you went up to Washington and Seattle and joined about 2,000 people to attend those hearings, and we won. And they have claimed that, or have ruled that CO2 is a danger to human health and welfare. Congress is trying to monkey around with it a little bit, but the EPA listened to us and they acted, and so we know that we can get that again. So we've kind of been having a bit of a press war with PGE lately. Ivan Molesky, our conservation coordinator, about a week or so ago, wrote an op-ed and was published in the Oregonian saying that 2020 is too late. We have no time to lose. Their plan is not on solid ground, and we need to look at an earlier closure date. And our great volunteer, Dan Cobb, wrote a really great letter to the editor in response, supporting our message. And you guys will get a copy of this in this handout. And then Jim Lobdell, the PGE's main energy source guy, he's like their main engineer for power generation, wrote a letter to the editor back. And so we need to get letters to the editor back again. I know it's it's fun, but this is a public messaging war, basically, and influential people and decision makers are reading this, and we need to make sure that they know that the public is very concerned about keeping this plant open until 2020. I just wanted to mention one other thing that wasn't on those talking points that I didn't get a chance to because we just kind of found out the answer yesterday. You'll see in Jim Lobdell's letter to the editor, he says that it's going to cost $600 million to shut down the Boardman coal plant in 2014. So yesterday we went to a public technical workshop that PGE put on. Found out that number is a little misleading. It's actually $200 million. $600 million in the short run, but we make up that money in the back end. And so on a whole, on the next 30 years, it'll cost $200 million to shut down the coal plant 6 years earlier. We're talking about an operating budget of $34 billion. $200 million. We can afford this. This is not too high of a cost. Our health and the fate of the planet is worth $200 million. We don't have another 10 years to address global warming. PGE says, oh, be reasonable, give us extra time. You've had time, guys. You've had time, and you've ignored it. And now the writing's on the wall, and you want more time, and there is no more time to give. Their own plan shows that they can shut it down in 2014. It's cost effective, and reliability is not the issue that they are creating. We can do this. And so if you guys would just mind writing a letter and getting the public support out there, that would be really appreciated. And we'll keep you all informed about what's going on as the PUC process goes forward and the DEQ process goes forward. There's going to be opportunity for you guys to make your voice heard in these public venues and telling our regulatory agencies that we've got to shut this thing down. There are a number of different roads to reach the winning part of this battle that we need. And there are so many organizations working on this, which is really great. And you do have groups like Greenpeace and some others who will be a little bit more upfront in your face, and we love them for that. The Sierra Club, we try to go the more traditional route. We don't do so much civil disobedience, but attending hearings is so powerful. I can't tell you how powerful that is. These guys are used to getting a bunch of industry suits, maybe 35 people or something like that at these meetings. If we got 500 people, if we got 1,000 people, if we got 5,000 people, you bet somebody's going to listen. And I think that is such a powerful way to have influence, because the people have the power. And to show that we can be civil, orderly, but speak our voice and speak it loud, I think is extremely powerful. And so please make sure you keep out for emails from me and Seisha about these hearings that will be coming up. It can be disheartening to see what's going on in Congress and the lack of movement and the lack of sense of urgency. All I know is, for me, what I can do is put one step in front of the other and try to shut down the Boardman coal plant. I think PG will go to a coal state senator and try and get a deal through them. But we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens. I think it's going to be really hard for them. See, there's another issue that I didn't mention, is that they got to figure all this stuff out by next year, because they got to start putting the order for the pollution controls. These things don't come, Federal Express, right? They take years. And so PG is saying we need to know by the first quarter of 2011 that we've got this deal okay through the federal government, through the state government. Sierra Club drops their lawsuit, and then we won't order the pollution controls, and we'll go forward. Problem is, Dave Robertson, their PR guy, steps up in front of the meeting yesterday and says, I think it's unlikely we're going to get this year to exempt us from the federal standards. We're going to go to the DEQ hearings and make sure that they know. And I don't think that they want to roll over on this, but we're going to have to make sure that we're really forceful and so that they know that they can't roll over on it. I think DEQ is not going to give them a free pass till 2020, but we'll see. We'll see, and we'll let you know about those hearings and comment periods when they come up. Well, I love when people say, oh, wind and solar can't do it, and we're not even investing in it. It's like, come on, people. Let's really invest in it and see where it gets us. I mean, I think that we could go a long way, but the big chunk, the big thing that's going to get us out of this mess is energy efficiency. We are wasting way too much energy in this country. It can get us halfway there. Energy efficiency alone can get us halfway there for replacing our energy. The Northwest Power and Conservation Council said that energy efficiency alone can do 85% of our future load growth in the Northwest. 85%. That means you never have to build another plant again. That 15% could easily be replaced or generated by renewables. Now, how do we start backing off the old stuff, though? Energy efficiency, again, can get us halfway there. Wind can get us there. Solar can get us there. Geothermal. Wave technology is on the way. Now, can we get it all up and running tomorrow? Probably not. Can we get it all up and running in time to stop global warming? Maybe not. So we're going to, have to have some kind of a transition fuel, and that's where natural gas can come in. And what natural gas can do is it can turn on and off, and it can help shape wind and solar because it's not always constant, right? And so it's a great way to kind of back up our renewables while we get them online and while we get enough diversity of a mix to get us into a clean energy future. The other thing that's great about, I'm not the big proponent of gas, but the other thing that's good about it is that they're cheap to build. What's expensive about a gas plant is the fuel. So you're not putting a whole lot of capital cost into something that you're willing to shut down in 20 years once we've got our renewables up and ready to go. So that's kind of where Sierra Club sees the path forward. But we do not see gas as the answer for long-term usage. It is to get us through the next couple of decades while we get all of this up and running.